Hello, this is Mr. Daniels, and we are reading the amazing short story of Rikki Tikki Tavi. It is a short story by Rudyard Kipling, and we're going to go ahead and get started here. This is the story of the great war that Rikki Tikki Tavi fought single-handed through the bathrooms of the big bungalow in the Segoli cantonment. Darzee the tailor bird helped him, and Chuchundra the muskrat, who never comes out in the middle of the floor but always creeps around by the wall, gave him advice. But Rikki Tikki did the real fighting. He was a mongoose, rather like a little cat in his fur and his tail, but quite like a weasel in his head and his habits. His eyes and the end of his restless nose were pink. He could scratch himself anywhere he pleased with any leg, front or back, that he chose to use. He could fluff up his tail till it looked like a bottle brush, and his war cry as he scuttled through the long grass was, "Rikki Tikki Tavi!" One day, a high summer flood washed him out of the burrow where he lived with his father and mother, and carried him, kicking and clucking, down a roadside ditch. He found a little wisp of grass floating there, and clung to it till he lost his senses. When he revived, he was laying in the hot sun in the middle of a garden patch, very draggled indeed, and a small boy was saying, "Oh, here's a dead mongoose! Let's have a funeral!" "No," said his mother. "Let's take him in and draw him. Perhaps he isn't really dead." They took him in the house, and a big man picked him up between his finger and his thumb, and said he was not half dead, but half choked. So they wrapped him in cotton wool and warmed him over a little fire, and he opened his eyes and sneezed. "No," said the big man. He was an Englishman who had just moved into the bungalow. "Don't frighten him. We'll see what he'll do." It's the hardest thing in the world to frighten a mongoose, because he's eaten up from nose to tail with curiosity. The motto of all the mongoose family is run and find out, and Rikki Tikki was a true mongoose. He looked at the cotton wool, decided that it was not good to eat, and ran all around the table, sat up and put his fur in order, scratched himself, and jumped on the small boy's shoulder. "Don't be frightened, Teddy," said his father. "That's his way of making friends." "Ouch, he's tickling under my chin," said Teddy. Rikki Tikki looked down between the boy's collar and neck and snuffed at his ear, and climbed down on the floor where he sat rubbing his nose. "Good gracious!" said Teddy's mother. "I'm not a wild creature. I suppose he's so tame because we've been kind to him." "All mongooses are like that," said the husband. "If Teddy doesn't pick him up by the tail or try to put him in a cage, he'll run in and out of the house all day long. Let's give him something to eat." They gave him a little piece of raw meat. Rikki Tikki liked it immensely, and when it was finished, he went out into the veranda and sat in the sunshine and fluffed up his fur to make it dry to the roots. Then he felt better. "There are more things to find out in this house," he said to himself, "than all my family could find out in all their lives. I shall certainly stay and find out." He spent all that day roaming over the house. He nearly drowned himself in the bathtubs, put his nose into the ink on the writing table, and burnt it on the end of the big man's cigar, for he climbed up on the big man's lap to see how writing was done. At nightfall, he ran into Teddy's nursery to watch how kerosene lamps were lighted. And when Teddy went to bed, Rikki Tikki climbed up too. But he was a restless companion because he had to get up and attend to every noise all through the night to find out what made it. Teddy's mother and father came in the last thing to look at their boy, and Rikki Tikki was awake on the pillow. "I don't like that," said Teddy's mother. "He may bite the child." "Oh, he'd do no such thing," said the father. "Teddy's safer with that little beast than if he had a bloodhound to watch him. Now, if a snake came into the nursery now—" But Teddy's mother wouldn't think of anything so awful. Early in the morning, Rikki Tikki came out to breakfast in the veranda riding on Teddy's shoulder, and they gave him a banana and some boiled egg, and he sat on their laps, one after the other, because every well-brought-up mongoose always hopes to be a house mongoose some day and have rooms to run around about in. And Rikki Tikki's mother, she used to live in the general's house at the Segoli, had carefully told Rikki what to do if he ever came across white men. Then Rikki Tikki went out into the garden to see what was to be seen. It was a large garden, only half cultivated, with bushes as big as summer houses, of Marshall Neal roses, lime and orange trees, clumps of bamboo, thickets of high grass. Rikki Tikki licked his lips. This is a splendid hunting ground, he said, and his tail grew bottle-brushy as the thought of it. And he scuttled up and down the garden, snuffing here and there till he heard a very sorrowful voice in the bush. It was Darzee, the tailor bird, and his wife. They had made a beautiful nest by pulling 2 big leaves together and stitching them up the edges with fibers, and had filled the hollow with cotton and downy fluff. The nest swayed to and fro as they sat in the rim and cried. "What is the matter?" asked Rikki Tikki. "We are very miserable," said Darzee. "One of our babies fell out of the nest yesterday, and Nag ate him." Said Rikki Tikki. "That is very sad, but I am a stranger here. Who is Nag?" Darzee and his wife only cowered down in the nest without answering, for from the thick grass at the foot of the bush there came a low hiss, a horrid, cold sound that made Rikki Tikki jump back 2 clear feet. Then, inch by inch, out of the grass rose up the head and spread hood of Nag, the big black cobra, and he was 5 feet long from tongue to tail. When he had lifted 1/3 of himself clear of the ground, he stayed balancing to and fro exactly as a dandelion tuft balances in the wind. And he looked at Rikki Tikki with the wicked snake's eyes that never changed their expression, whatever the snake may be thinking of. "Who is Nag?" said he. "I am Nag. The great god Brahm put his mark on all our people when the first cobra spread his hood to keep them off the son of Brahm as he slept. Look and be afraid." He spread out his hood more than ever, and Rikki Tikki saw a spectacle mark on the back of it that looks exactly like the eye part of a hook and eye fastening. He was afraid for the minute, but it was impossible for a mongoose to stay frightened for any length of time. And though Rikki Tikki had never met a live cobra before, his mother had fed him on dead ones, and he knew that all a grown mongoose's business in life was to fight and eat snakes. Nag knew that too, and at the bottom of his cold heart, he was afraid. "Well," said Rikki Tikki, and his tail began to fluff up again. "Marks or no marks, do you think it's right to eat the fledglings out of a nest?" Nag was thinking to himself and watching the least little movement in the grass behind Rikki Tikki. He knew that mongooses in the garden meant death sooner or later for him and his family, but he wanted to get Rikki Tikki off his guard. So he dropped his head a little and put it to one side. "Let us talk," he said. "You eat eggs. Why should I not eat birds?" "Behind you! Look behind you!" sang Darzee. Rikki Tikki knew better than to waste time in staring. He jumped up in the air as high as he could go and whizzed just under him, whizzed by the head of Najina, Nag's wicked wife. She had crept up behind him as he was talking to make an end of him, and he heard her savage hiss as the stroke missed. He came down almost across her back, and if he had been an old mongoose, he would have known that it was the time to break her back with one bite, but he was afraid of the terrible lashing return stroke of the cobra. He bit indeed, but did not bite long enough, and he jumped clear of the whisking tail, leaving Najina torn and angry. "Wicked, wicked Darzee," said Nag, lashing up as high as he could reach toward the nest in the thorn bush. But Darzee had built it out of the reach of snakes and had only swayed to and fro. Rikki Tikki felt his eyes growing red and hot. When Mongoose's eyes grow red, he is angry. And he sat back on his tail and hind legs like a little kangaroo, and looked all around him and chattered with rage. But Nag and Najina had disappeared into the grass.